we are interested in maintenance activities. We try to think with maintenance and with maintainers. And this means, among other things, that we approach the idea of reparation and repair not as an operation that has a beginning and an end, but as an ongoing process that never really stops. So studying maintenance invites us to consider reparation as a repetitive form of care and insisting on this idea of repetitions. And making maintenance an entry point also invites us to adopt a very extensive vision of the idea of ecology, maybe, which includes artifacts from the most mundane, ordinary object to the used to the infrastructures. So in a way, following maintenance helps us to bring back what Bruno Latour used to call the missing masses of these mundane objects into ecological issues.
By exploring the relationship maintainers foster with the object they take care of, we also discovered that they apprehend these artifacts, these things, within a wide material ecology that goes both beyond and below the boundaries of things as we know them in ordinary life. That is to say, within this ecology, maintainers develop sensible encounters through which they cultivate their attention to material fragility. Actually, they stare, they smell, they touch things. But doing so, they are themselves fragile. They are also touched in return. Their bodies are worn out throughout these material encounters. And so maintenance situations, therefore, are also reveal an ecology of fragility between human and more than humans. And as you may know, between caregivers and cared for.
How do I become attentive to fragility? When I have an object, whichever object it is, you know, a different sound that it might make in a certain moment might alarm me that there is something happening with this object. Or, you know, you hold your recorder and then you touch it and suddenly it's warmer or it's hot and you realize there is something happening with my recorder. There might be a problem. And there are all these millions, really millions of invisible dimensions in how we engage with objects, and you bring this to life through your work. Can you tell us a bit more about this idea of becoming attentive to fragility?
Returning to our own experience is really that this idea to thinking with maintainers and to try to understand what maintainers can teach us in this regard precisely, because we may. It depends of people, of course, but we may have a very non-attentive relationship with our artifacts. And when we discovered first maintenance activities, we were working on subway signs, and we were obsessed with sturdiness and with standardization, with the strength of all that. And with the first actor network theory idea of mutable immobile and immobility and mutability and stuff like that. So it's really the way maintenance workers, so occupations, not very glamorous work, the way they treat the subway signs, and the way they look at them, the way they touch them, and after that, a lot of other kind of maintenance workers. But we discover that we may have this kind of relationship, but we have to become sensible to it, and they can help us to be sensible to this kind of fragility. But a fragility which is not, which is a common condition in a way. Is not. This is not. This is very different from being shaken up by a breakdown, for instance, because in most science and technology studies, what we use to be aware of fragility is example of breakdowns. You have to pay attention to it. You have to cultivate it. You have to. So for some things, we have learned to do that. We know that if our fun is too hot, this is not good, as you mentioned. We know some of this stuff, but there is a lot of other artifacts that may present signs of wear, signs of fragility we are not aware of. The problem is that we cannot be aware of and become sensible of every kind of sensibility or fragility, because the world will be unlivable if we do so. So it's also a balance, and it's also a distribution of work.
Just to say that fragility is not something that come at some point to a thing or to a human. This is part of its essential existence, and not as a negative part, just as something that actually we and everybody has to taken care of. And this is only to rephrase in a small sentence. The other thing is maybe try to address differently the question, the Dimitris question is to go further into the bodily activity related to this attention. This is not only to be aware of fragility, is not only of being aware, let's say, in the mind or through the eyes. This is a clearly bodily activity. A sensorial activity, and this is really what we learned with the maintainers, shadowing them day after day, and just listening and discovering how they cultivate their bodily encounters with things.
You talk about the maintainers of the water systems, and you talk about those who try to get rid of the graffitis, and how does this, do they kind of get attached to that kind of specific, I would say, job, but it's beyond the job, it's a skill, it's a craft, etc. So could you tell us, maybe elaborate, or maybe even a story about what that means?
In a way, maintainers can develop a very personalized relationship to things and their things. And of course, for instance, the graffiti removers, they are attached to Paris, because we were in Paris. They really consider they take care of the city. And this is striking. If you don't know, the first time you follow them and you listen to them, this is very, very interesting. But they also are attached to, and they know this facade, this window shop, and so they developing this particular kind of attention. It's not only being attached to an object, it's being attached to an ecology. This means that it is the city, the street, the people that live in the street. Getting to know, this is the English, getting to know something, like you get to know someone in a way. So they develop this kind of specific relationship, which is ecological, because it's not only your body and the body of the thing. It's an ecology of things. And of course, for the water system, it's completely different. For the water system, it can be the kind of soil which is around a reservoir, for instance, the kind of plants, and the quality of the water, for instance. What water is made of, what it is fragile too, what you put into it to clean it and stuff like that. So, for instance, graffiti removers are very literally fascinating because when they touch the stone and the ink or the paint, they are capable of telling you that how the paint will migrate within the stone because the stone has a specific quality of breathing qualities, and in a way they speak like Ingold or even Karen Barad, but they are maintainers, and this is the way they are attached to these facades, and in a way they help us, and it's not completely a joke, they help us to better understand Karen Barad or Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, this idea of flux of matters and stuff like that, because this is their problem. So they are very specific. They are not the same when you are in the subway or in a water system infrastructure. So they develop very specific kind of attachment, which are ecological and which can be referred to a kind of material politics, because different matters and the way matters behave are grasped differently.
Yeah, I was more about trying to add another dimension is about this personalized encounters and personalized knowledge and situation. Actually, it was those professional, those maintenance occupation are based on repeated activities, as Jérôme said at the very beginning. This is not a one-shot activity. This is a repeated encounters with the same thing or object, and this is through this repeated encounters that this personalized attachment knowledge is cultivated, and this is really important. This is what we really understood following shadowing them. This is through this repeated series of encounters that they not only get attached but and cultivate their knowledges, but also they are keen to make very deep inquiries into similarities and differences. This is really the point. We already know it by reading colleagues, but we really understood it following them. This really Deleuzian question about repetition and difference. We really understood it shadowing them, and understood that personalized encounters is really a perfect site to understand how the same thing is different, and how shadowing them and how they are attentive to these things. Not only they get attached in a personalized way, being attentive to this repeated presence and sometimes more or more important variation and difference, but they also get to know, to trying to go back to what Jérôme already said about faire connaissance. They really get to know and go deeper in this personalized encounter by having a series of cases with this specific object, but also with other similar objects. The temporal dimension of maintenance, and actually it's really a common dimension of maintenance, but dealt with in a different way depending on the thing and the maintenance and the ecology of work. But in most of the ethnographic fieldwork we already done, this is this temporal dimension is really related to an ordering process, and a very clear ordering process regarding how the thing have to be and or should be. This is really what appear in subway signs maintenance, where the sign have to be always the same at their own place. This is an ever-present maintenance where a sign had to be had to come with no variation. So maintenance is really a repetitive and temporal activity dedicated to this. And regarding graffiti removal, this is at some point the same. They have to produce a graffiti-free city. And so they have to, so the schedule is at some point really articulated to this reason, to this objective. But in one chapter we are currently rewriting. The temporal point is more open to other cases, and we try to identify not regime, not type, but to identify different temporal
problematization.
Yeah, problematization dedicated to different objects.
Maintaining is making things last, so it's building time for things, and what we try to analyze through our own cases, but a lot of other cases, all colleagues doing what we now call maintenance and repair studies, is that there is different ways of making times for things, which is there is different ways of making time a problem. So it's not social construction of time, it's having time as a problem, and so we try to make things last. So that's the first point. And this is connected to very specific temporalities of maintenance work. So there is this first aspect. But the idea of a slowness which enters in tension, which could enter in tension with growing kind of management of work nowadays. This is something that somehow Steve Jackson has written about in a book about time. He has this great expression about maintenance, which is that maintenance is the slow belly of modern societies, which are supposedly accelerating, but they are accelerating because of this slow belly, which is still there. So this is really interesting, but still, of course, they are also confronted with kind of management who could not consider this importance of the slowness of the attention, who could imagine that repetition could be automation, and that maintenance is not care, has nothing to do with personalized knowledge and all the things we just talked about. So a lot of maintenance is outsourced, of course, and externalized, which is a very problematic way of dealing with maintenance, because even if workers can be attached to things as outsourced, in outsourced companies, but sometimes it can be organized as a very repetitive in a bad sense of the term, a very mechanistic way. So forgetting that slowness is important. And if you want to put sufficient work and slow work and then costly work, you have to reconsider how these things are valued and how this work is valued too. So there is a connection between the valuation of these assets, and it is also connected to assetization, the valuation of these things, the valuation of this work, and how making these things last can be acknowledged as something that has to be costly in money and in time. So, but it's still, the situations are very, very different regarding the domains and the kind of things. So we should not go too further into generalizing all this, but this is very, very crucial aspect of it. we are very interested in a way that maintenance can develop an ecological sensibility to fragility, even in cases that are not very ecological. Let's say that removing graffiti is not the best activity, but still. There is another aspect which is very important, and I think we really are attached to this idea that we cannot be pro or anti-maintenance. This makes no sense, especially what you just said. You can maintain horrible regimes and very, very problematic infrastructures, for instance. So maintenance is not something that we have to be pro or anti. But this is something that you can be aware of and become aware of and become sensible to this idea that things do not last by themselves.